everybody. Welcome to our masterclass with Dr. Barry Sandler. Today we are going to be discussing how to prevent cardiovascular disease in Healthspan. Just as a quick recap, we are so proud to announce that we have officially surpassed 100 people enrolled and through the program. We still have 50 more on our list to get enrolled through the rest of the summer. We've received great feedback, and we're so excited to hear how Healthspan is improving everybody's lives. Okay. Take it away, Barry.
Thank you. Dr. Barry Sandler. I'm a physician here with the Healthspan program and really excited to be a part of this whole groundbreaking program. And like Sophia said, we're doing awesome and have had tons of great results so far and moving forward rapidly. So I wanted to talk about cardiovascular disease prevention in Healthspan. It's not a lecture about how to diagnose and treat cardiovascular disease or heart disease, but more how to prevent it, because it's just really one of the main driving forces and hallmark in what we're doing in Healthspan is preventing disease and particularly heart disease. So my daughter drew this cool picture when she was a senior in high school in an art class. There's like hands holding a heart, and there's a little rose there. And I thought that was pretty cool. I used to be an emergency physician in my prior life, and we would do emergency surgeries in the emergency department for someone who needed their heart exposed open heart massage, we'd call it. So it kind of reminded me of that. But cool picture. So William Osler in 1880 said, "You are as old as your blood vessels," which was pretty insightful, being it was so long ago. He's like one of the founding fathers of modern medicine. There's 60,000 miles of blood vessels in your body. As you can see in this is a plastination image. I don't know if anybody have seen these plastination displays that go on tour around the country and I think around the world. But this is an actual body with just the blood vessels exposed. Amazing how much blood vessels are in the head, face, lungs. Those are not lungs. Those are all blood vessels in the lungs, and then liver, spleen, and your organs there. Pretty cool. One of my favorite movies, Terminator 2, I say, "Come with me if you want to live." And I think this is the real way to live, is through Healthspan and healthy lifestyle and exercise and nutrition. Just a quick anatomy. Not everybody realizes that the coronary arteries are on the outside of the heart, and that's what feeds the heart blood. So these blue things are the veins that return blood from the body. The red thing at the top, that's the aortic arch. That is a big artery that gives blood out to the rest of the body and all the organs. But before it does that, you can see that these coronary arteries, you can see the right coronary artery here on the left side of the heart, and then the left coronary system is on the other side, on the right side of the screen. But the heart feeds itself blood before it gives blood to the rest of the body. And it's these little blood vessels that can get blocked with atherosclerosis and plaques and lipids, and over time gradually narrow the blood flow. When that blood flow is completely occluded, that's when you get a heart attack or death to the heart muscle. That's infarction. If that happens in the brain, that's a stroke. You can have infarctions in every organ, really, the liver, kidney, pancreas, you name it. In the periphery, if you get a blocked artery in your leg, you'll have an ischemic leg, or that's no blood flow to your leg. So this is the anatomy that we're talking about today. Just in general, some insight into cardiovascular disease in the U.S. and in the world. It still remains the leading cause of death globally, cardiovascular disease. It accounts for 18 million deaths worldwide and 700,000 deaths in the U.S. from cardiovascular disease. It's important to know that 80% of cardiovascular disease is preventable. That's heart attack and stroke, completely preventable through lifestyle modifications like we're teaching here in Healthspan. Really important to control your nutrition, activity, smoking, sleep hygiene, and stress. These are all cardiac risk factors that we'll talk about in the lecture, but these are completely modifiable or changeable habits that directly link your health and make you live long and strong in Healthspan. Quick anatomy lesson. There's a small amount of anatomy and a small amount of chemistry. I want to keep it simple and not be too scientific or overwhelming, but it's important to understand. In the picture here, this is a lining of the blood vessel, the kind of tunnel there, that's the endothelium. That's the single cell lining of every blood vessel in the body. There's a lot of biochemistry that goes on in that lining, but that's what we need to protect, the endothelium. And that's where this inflammation can occur and blood clots and leads to organ dysfunction. The endothelium releases a substance called NO, that's nitric oxide, and that allows the blood vessels to relax and allow blood to freely flow, and keeps your blood pressure down. When there's poor nitric oxide production or presence in the blood vessels, that's when you get vasoconstriction, narrowing of the blood vessels, and your blood pressure goes up, right? Same amount of volume in the vessel with a more narrow space that raises the pressure. There's a lot of immune function that goes on within this endothelium that can cause clots and injury from these kind of inflammatory circulating substances that we'll talk about more in the lecture, but that's where all the business happens, in the endothelium. Similar schematic of kind of a progression of atherosclerosis, so that means narrowing of the blood vessels from plaques and cholesterol. On the top left is a normal vessel, nice and clear, wide open, and then you see the yellow plaque there. And then the progression on the bottom, you get plaque formation. Once the plaque gets more than 50% narrowing, it gets increases risk of rupture. And when that plaque ruptures, it's like closing a door on the blood vessel, and you get no flow, and that's when you get severe chest pain, arrhythmia, sudden death, heart attack. If it happens in the brain, that's a stroke. So what causes that stuff? It's really inflammation in the blood vessel. And there's lots of different things that cause inflammation, but things we can control. And the primary driver of cardiovascular disease is inflammation, and it's by lifestyle. It's the crap that we eat. Pardon my French, but it's true. The sad standard American diet is filled with fast food, highly processed foods. Sugar is in just about everything on the shelf at the market. So you really need to avoid seed oils. That's, I think, a huge driver of the American poor health is seed oils. And that's like fried foods, refined carbohydrates like bread, white rice, pasta, sugary cereals, waffles and pancakes, tortillas. These things are all delicious, but they're really bad for you. And this is what causes inflammation in your blood vessels. I like to say eat real food. An apple, a banana, a burger, a steak, chicken. These things do not cause inflammation, and they do not cause heart disease. So when you have this inflammation in the lining of your blood vessel, there's an acute injury to the lining of the blood vessel. And that's kind of starts this cascade of events in plaque formation. But at the top, it's important to notice and realize that atherosclerosis is a postprandial phenomenon. That's after eating. You eat a meal filled with inflammatory foods. If you go to the drive-thru at Wendy's and you get a burger and a Frosty and French fries, that's highly inflammatory stuff filled with sugar and processed foods. You get acute inflammation in the blood vessel, and then the plaques start to build up, and it's cumulative over your lifetime. And you never really know when that plaque's going to rupture. We can do lots of fancy tests like angiograms and look at the blood vessels directly or indirectly, and know if you need a stent or a bypass or revascularization procedure that we say, like opening up the blood vessel. But sometimes a vessel that's only 10 or 20% can blocked with the plaque can rupture, and that door closes, and it can cause acute heart attack. So it's not unheard of to see people that have normal cardiac workups or normal angiograms, and then they go on to have an acute heart attack. Other things that cause inflammation in the blood vessels are smoking. The smoke is not only bad for your mucous membranes in your lungs and your mouth and your throat, but this stuff gets into your blood and causes inflammation. Environmental triggers like pollution and heavy metals. We see heavy metal ingestion from some fish that we eat. The larger fish like tuna can have mercury and lead. Lead is common in foods, unfortunately. There's a recent report of these kind of pills and powder substances like athletic greens and other similar green drinks. It takes so much vegetables to refine and concentrate into these powders that all the lead gets kind of magnified because they're using so much so much volume to get the powder formed that there's increased levels of lead in these products. Hyperglycemia, or high blood sugar from diabetes. This is a known irritant and inflammatory substance in the blood vessels. So it's kind of the mechanism of inflammation. Chronic infections like COVID or periodontal disease, gum disease, is a known cardiac risk factor. That gum disease is closely linked to heart disease and stroke, narrowing of the arteries in your neck, your carotid arteries as well. So at the bottom, just the progression, again, is a chronic plaque. The plaque ruptures, causes thrombosis, that's a blood clot. And then infarction is death to the end organ. So this lining of the blood vessel, that's so important, the endothelium, a little bit more chemistry, but we already mentioned that the endothelium is the inner lining of the blood vessel. That malfunctions in response to inflammation. You get impaired nitric oxide production, so you need that nitric oxide again for the blood vessel to relax. You get vasoconstriction, narrowing of the blood vessel, blood clot, thrombosis, and then end organ dysfunction. Again, it's from inflammation, high blood sugar, smoking, sedentary lifestyle, and chronic stress. So we know that things like poor sleep, emotional and psychological stress increases your circulating stress hormones and increases your cardiac risk. This leads to like chest pain if it's in the heart, shortness of breath, exercise intolerance, high blood pressure, and endothelial dysfunction. Again, implications are narrowing of the blood vessels. Atherosclerosis can cause heart attack, heart failure, diabetes, stroke. CKD is chronic kidney disease, so the exact same mechanism that we're talking about in the heart and the brain. If it occurs in your kidneys, your kidney function worsens. Neuropathy is damage to your blood vessels from chronically elevated blood sugar, and you get numbness and tingling over time, or pain in your extremities. That's common in later stage diabetes. So just at the bottom, I put a quick sentence that it's critical to recognize this deadly implications of endothelial dysfunction for cardiovascular disease for prevention and early intervention. Tiny bit more chemistry, and then we'll move on to more clinical stuff, but this is kind of the nuts and bolts of what happens in the endothelium and why you get inflammation and diseased blood vessels. The inflammation is really infiltration of white blood cells into the endothelium. Oxidative stress is when your natural biochemistry gets overwhelmed by too much inflammation in foods and lifestyle choices. And then immune dysfunction is the body like freaks out from this inflammation and oxidative stress and then sends all these different chemicals. Those are over 500 different chemicals that we call cytokines that cause inflammation and disease. And really, that's the hallmark of chronic disease, is infiltration of these different inflammatory substances that cause chronic dementia, heart disease, diabetes, really through programmed cell death and senescence, which is cells that kind of circulate around the blood, don't do much anymore as far as function, but they do cause chronic disease and inflammation. This is a fascinating slide. It's from this cardiologist who wrote this book, Mark Houston, What Your Doctor May Not Tell You About Heart Disease. It's 13 years old already, written in 2012, but I've met Dr. Houston. He's a great lecturer. And the first 5 things on the list we know about, what are the modifiable risk factors for heart disease? We all know that high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high blood sugar like diabetes, obesity, and smoking are cardiac risk factors. But we might not realize that other things in our lifestyle and things that we can change are really important to recognize and limit and get control of in your life. Things like omega-3 fatty acids. Those are the fatty acids that are found in mostly fish. There's plant sources as well, but low omega-3s is a cardiac risk factor. Low dietary potassium and magnesium and a high sodium diet, high salt diet, is a known cardiac risk factor. On the right side, inflammation, increased oxidative stress, we talked about that, and vascular immune dysfunction, but lack of sleep, lack of exercise, stress, and anxiety and depression. Psychiatric illness is a cardiac risk factor. This is proven. There's great objective data that we know that people with bad mental illness live shorter, much less healthy lives. Chronic infections, I mentioned that chronic COVID or other infections like chronic lung infections, chronic bronchitis. If you're a smoker, there's chronic viral infections like Epstein-Barr virus and even herpes simplex virus that causes like cold sores or shingles. These chronic infections are known risk factors for coronary heart disease. Micronutrient deficiencies are really important. That's why we test for these things like magnesium and vitamin D. We like to supplement with CoQ10 if indicated. These are all nutrients that these deficiencies cause heart disease. We talked a bit about heavy metals already. If you eat a lot of fish, or there's other sources of heavy metals. Environmental pollution, we know that cities like Beijing, LA, New York, that the air is just dark with pollution and industry. We know that these towns tend to have higher rates of heart attack, stroke, and cardiovascular disease. Environmental pollutants are important. I recently learned that if you live on or near a golf course, all the fertilizers that they use and herbicides and pesticides increases your risk for neurodegenerative disease like dementia and Parkinson's disease. So I just had actually did it myself, installed a reverse osmosis water filter in my house just to ensure that I'm not ingesting these pesticides and herbicides. This is kind of the pathophysiology or progression of heart disease, impaired vasodilation. So that's high blood pressure from inflammation in the endothelium. You get stress, oxidative stress, that leads to high blood pressure, atherosclerosis. Thrombosis is blood clot. So we talked about how you get progression of the clot in the vessel, and it narrows and blocks blood flow, and that causes coronary artery disease in those small vessels on the outside of the heart that can clot and cause heart failure, arrhythmia, sudden death, all these bad things that we're trying to avoid. There's lots of other organs that are affected by endothelial dysfunction. Diabetes, so exact same mechanism. The blood vessels are everywhere, like we already demonstrated. So if you have atherosclerosis in your heart, you probably have it in your carotid arteries. You probably have it in your kidneys, in your pancreas. So endothelial dysfunction in the pancreas causes diabetes and high blood pressure. Even erectile dysfunction, male erectile dysfunction is a known cardiac risk factor now, and it can precede coronary artery disease by up to 5 years. So an important symptom to recognize and use as kind of a microscope in your health. We talk about the big four of chronic disease. This isn't necessarily cardiac related, but it is certainly indirectly. So 85% of us will die from one of these disease processes, not only atherosclerosis, but neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, metabolic disorders from diabetes, obesity, hypertension, and high cholesterol. And then cancers as well. So the other 15% is people succumb to drug overdoses thanks to the fentanyl epidemic and other opioid epidemics, trauma, and infections like COVID. Also not directly cardiac related, but I just like this slide to point out that 80% of your health and your health span is shaped by your lifestyle, by nutrition and exercise. These things carry the heaviest weight in what we're doing in health. At the bottom here, we mentioned oxidative stress and mitochondrial health. This is how you produce energy in your body through ATP and mitochondria. But it's also important to recognize that epigenetics is this theory of how you express your own chromosomes and genes. So just because a family member of mine may have heart disease, it doesn't mean I'm going to get heart disease. I'm kind of predisposed or genetically loaded, we say, but then my lifestyle directly influences how these genes are expressed. And there's no fate in medicine. You can control all this stuff. Some therapeutic strategies for endothelial health are aerobic and anaerobic exercise is really important to get in your bike, get out for a walk or a jog, and then to strength train too. We know how important strength training is. Diet like a Mediterranean diet, which is healthy oils like olive oil and avocado oil. Lots of fruits and vegetables, healthy meats like chicken and fish. Beef is fine as long as you don't have a whole lot of other cardiac risk factors. The DASH diet is dietary approach to stop hypertension. It's really the Mediterranean diet with a low salt component. And then we talked about nitric oxide as an important component of vascular health. You get nitric oxide from dark foods like green leafy vegetables, but dark stuff like spinach and kale. And then every day I eat blueberries, blackberries, strawberries, raspberries. These dark fruits and vegetables carry a ton of nitric oxide and really help with vascular health. There's some great supplements that are antioxidants like CoQ10. Quercetin is a potent anti-inflammatory and antioxidant. It does a lot of other cool stuff. Resveratrol, found in red wine. You can get this as a supplement in a pill. And then glutathione and N-acetylcysteine is NAC. These are potent antioxidants that are readily available and safe. So you have to control your high blood pressure, lipids, metabolic dysfunction, and absolutely no smoking, including vaping. Vaping, just as much as cigarette smoke, gets into your blood vessels and causes inflammation and causes endothelial dysfunction. So I've heard lots of teenagers say how safe vaping is. It's just water vapor and it's so fun and it tastes so good, but it's not. It's BS. It gets into your vessels and causes inflammation. And then again, important to minimize seed oils, excess sugar, and refined starches. Some cool lab markers that we're doing in Healthspan that probably go above and beyond what your primary care physician may be doing. ApoB is another way to look at LDL, or the quote bad cholesterol. It's really the single most accurate test for atherosclerosis. So it's great that we're able to kind of zoom in on these kind of higher return biochemical tests. LPA, that's lipoprotein A, it's a genetic risk for cardiovascular disease. It's kind of how your body interprets and uses your fats and your risk for disease. We like to look at LDL particle number. That's large LDL and small LDL. So just the total LDL is not enough. It's the small particles that get through the vascular lining, the blood vessel lining, get into your the lower layers of the blood vessel and cause plaques. So if your LDL is high, but you have lots of big, fluffy LDL particles, it's not as serious or not as dangerous as small particles. We know triglycerides and HDL are markers for insulin resistance and metabolic dysfunction. So we like to follow those things. CRP is a really cool test. That's high sensitivity C-reactive protein. It's a marker of total body inflammation. And when we see that, we go on a hunt and we go looking for what's causing the inflammation. Maybe you are gluten intolerant. Maybe you're getting some excess sugar in your diet that you don't realize, like from some protein bars. I used to think that all these bars were so healthy because, it says so right on the package and there's lots of protein in them. But if you look closely, a lot of them have a lot of sugar. It's really hard to find any kind of granola bars and protein bars that don't have a lot of excess sugar. Homocysteine is a really cool marker that we test. It's the way your body metabolizes B vitamins, and it's a genetically predetermined. There's two different genes that control B vitamin metabolism, and when one of these are abnormal, or both of them, it can be kind of partially abnormal. We call it heterozygous, or homozygous is kind of both sides of the gene abnormal. It causes elevated homocysteine, and then that directly causes inflammation and cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis, brain disease, stuff like that. So that's easily controlled with like a methylated B vitamin complex, but it's important to identify and know if you have this elevated homocysteine. And then we talked a bit about omega-3 and 6 fatty acids as well, mostly from fish, but chia seeds and other vegetable sources are possible to get omegas if you don't like fish or for whatever other reason don't eat a lot of fish. Some other cool things we're doing here in Healthspan is we follow your hemoglobin A1C. That's a 3-month average of your blood sugar. So you might have a normal blood sugar today, but tomorrow it's elevated, or if you eat a bowl of oatmeal, maybe your blood sugar goes up for 3 hours and then comes back down. This gets reflected in your hemoglobin A1C. Fasting insulin is a kind of a better marker for metabolic function. We want your fasting insulin to be very low. We don't want a lot of big swings in your blood sugar and your insulin levels. Waist circumference, we know, is closely linked to metabolic health and cardiovascular risk. So men, we want your waist to be 37 inches or less, and women 32 inches or less. Visceral fat is another thing that we look at in our in-body scale. It takes these really cool biometric tests of your body composition. So we want to, and it can measure visceral fat. So we want to make sure that abdominal fat and fat around your organs is low. That's a cardiac risk factor. We know VO2 max and strength are really important parameters for overall health. And then heart rate variability. I've recently been fascinated and kind of done a deep dive into HRV. We get that information from the Oura Ring, and that's the HRV is kind of the time in between your heartbeats. You don't, nobody's heart rate is always constant, even at rest. If it's 60, 60, 60 over several seconds or minutes, that's not great. You want your heart rate to kind of vary. When we do EKGs on teenagers, we see it kind of goes up and down with their respirations. That's called sinus arrhythmia, and that's normal, and that's a sign of a healthy heart. So if you take a deep breath, you get increased intrathoracic pressure, and that draws blood into your heart. So then your heart says, well, I have all this blood in my heart, I can slow down. So if you take a deep breath and watch your pulse, your heart rate should drop. That's heart rate variability. When you exhale, your heart has less blood, and then your heart rate speeds up, and it happens immediately. So it's important to track HRV. When you're stressed, you don't sleep very well, or you have a cold, or you've had one or two alcoholic drinks, your heart rate variability immediately drops. Mine certainly does, and it's cool to watch that. Some dietary interventions that we can do for cardiovascular health. We mentioned the Mediterranean diet, focusing on nitric oxide. So you want at least 4 servings of fruits and berries every day and 6 servings of dark vegetables. Caloric restriction is another really cool technique for cardiovascular health. If you do like 12.5% caloric restriction, so just trying to eat 12% less per day, and you can get the other 12.5% from energy expenditure like exercise, that's 25% reduction in calories, and over days and weeks and months, that really adds up, and it's kind of a cool way to look at reshaping your body composition. We want to focus on lean proteins, complex carbohydrates like sweet potatoes and other vegetables have healthy carbohydrates. Not all carbs are bad, just simple sugars and highly refined carbohydrates. Tons of vegetables, extra virgin olive oil and avocado oil are really healthy. Those are the 2 oils that are healthy, and those are the ones you should focus on. Coconut oil is pretty good too. It tends to be higher in calories, so I would kind of focus on those 2 oils. And then again, no refined carbohydrates. We talk a lot about exercise, sleep and stress reduction, ideal body weight. So for men, that's a body fat under 18%, 16%. And then for women, under 22%. Those numbers are pretty low. You see bodybuilders or extreme athletes get down in the single digits, but for the general population, if you're under 16% body fat and 22% for women, you're doing pretty good, and you're decreasing your cardiovascular risk. And then, of course, we want to reduce inflammation, like we've talked about. I just put together a list of supplements that are proven to benefit cardiovascular health and endothelial dysfunction. So there's been a lot of research with whey protein recently. Not everybody tolerates whey. I don't. I get a rash from it. But I use like a plant-based protein, pea protein product, omega-3 fatty acids. Probiotics for gut health is really important. We know that this leaky gut syndrome is real. It used to be kind of theoretical, and we now know it's true. So the lining of your intestines is only 1 layer thick. If that gets disrupted from inflammation and high sugars and processed carbohydrates, then it can damage the lining of your blood vessel, and the contents of your intestine literally gets into your blood vessels and causes this kind of total body inflammation. So that's one place that we look in the gut if we see elevated inflammatory markers like that CRP. Multivitamins are really important to get your micronutrients that you're not necessarily getting in your diet. It's hard to get all the kind of minor vitamins and minerals like zinc and selenium and potassium in your kind of regular diet. CoQ10, vitamin D3, and K2. The K2 component's really cool. That's another vitamin that takes your calcium that you eat. Vitamin D is closely linked to calcium metabolism, but the K2 forces that calcium back into your bones and keeps it out of your blood vessels. So if you're taking D3, it's important to have this K2 component. Quercetin and Vicetin are really interesting substances. They're supplements that are potent antioxidants and fight this endothelial inflammatory cascades, and also they're great for senescence cell clearing, so clearing these old kind of zombie cells out of your blood that can cause inflammation. Vitamin C and magnesium also really, really important for endovascular health. Getting to the end here, but just want to recap that the Vail Healthspan model is prevention equals power. Cardiovascular disease is completely modifiable at any age. We've had several clients in their 80s that we are really excited to be working with, and this stuff is, changed at any age, easily changed with lifestyle change. And then we want to be data informed, habit driven, and root cause focused in Healthspan. Last slide here, I just say eat real food, exercise every day, manage sleep and stress, and you're most of the way there. Thanks for your attention today. Happy to always take questions by email or engage in conversations on our WhatsApp application. But we did have one question that was sent in recently. Someone asked, for females specifically, how do I know if I'm overtraining or if I am running or biking or lifting weights too much? That can cause elevated cortisol levels, the stress hormone. What's a good way to kind of follow that stuff? I would say it's important to have a total awareness of your body. This stuff is so individualized. Like some people may tolerate running 50 miles a week and some people can't tolerate running 10 miles a week. So if you're really sore, you're not recovering very well, your exercise performance is going down despite adequate sleep, HRV is a great way to monitor this, or heart rate variability with the Oura Ring. There's other apps that do it, like Apple Watch and other things can track heart rate variability. If you're irritable, moody, things like that, I think these are great ways to track your kind of overtraining. I think our fitness experts on the team can probably better individualize that care, but those are good starting points for knowing if you're overtraining.
Thank you so much, Dr. Berry, for that presentation. As always, this presentation will be linked on our YouTube channel to share with all of our community members and anybody that you think may benefit from learning about cardiovascular health. Upcoming events with the Healthspan program, our nutritionist Christine is hosting her Thriving Together in Our Next Chapter menopause group. This is on Wednesdays, June 18th, 25th, and July 9th and 16th from 5:30 to 7 at Colorado Mountain College. If you are interested and would like to sign up, please email Sophia at her Vail Health email, and we will get you signed up. Our next masterclass is with our fitness coach, Vicki, on mindset and resilience. Then we have Christine here to discuss the bitter truth about sugar. And we have our Healthspan and Wellness Retreat in Costa Rica, November 1st through the 8th. And you can learn more at vailhealth.org/retreat. Thank you so much for tuning into our masterclass today, and we look forward to seeing you next week.